welcome to you. Welcome to Personality and Performance, How Your Preferences Help You Succeed. My name is Marjorie Wharton, and I am your facilitator for this evening. It is a pleasure to have you all here for what is, for me, the first of these types of events that I'm doing for my company, Breakthrough Performance Coaching. And I'm going to spend a little time talking with you about uh, personality, about performance, about your preferences and how they influence your ability to be effective. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to then move on to looking at some myths associated with personality and performance. And we're going to wrap up with me giving you some strategies and some ideas about what I think you can do with regards to managing your own preferences and putting yourself in a good position in order to perform at a high level, not in spite of your personality, but really as a result of it. And then we'll do our wrap up and our close. Let's get started. So just to say a little bit about myself, as I mentioned to you before, my name is Marjorie Wharton. My company is Breakthrough Performance Coaching. And so if you've been following me on LinkedIn and you've had a chance to look at my profile and so on, you may already know some of this information. So I'm just going to mention it very briefly. I have spent my career really working with leaders and helping people to develop and grow, helping people to become better. And I have found that a key part of their ability to do that really comes from a deep understanding and awareness of themselves. And so I say to people repeatedly that leadership development is really about self-development. And what I wanted to do as I moved into working on my own with my business Breakthrough Performance Coaching, I wanted really to help people continue that kind of development, awareness, and growth, that recognition, that understanding who you are and understanding what you're capable of and what your strengths are is really the foundation for your success as you go forward. And so, having spent all these years working with leaders and years of working with participants with dealing with behavioral preferences and so on, I have also been fortunate enough to be able to put a lot of that into practice in the organization where I work, which was the Cahill School of Business at the University of the West Indies. And having been employed there for many years, I was able to work with a wide cross section of people who had different personalities, different behavioral preferences. And so I have been able to work with them to help them identify what works for them and really identify strategies that will help them to cope and to really succeed and thrive in their own preferences, using their own preferences and in the types of careers that they may choose for themselves. So I have always been interested in this from the very first time that I started studying anything about human behavior and the differences in how we behave and the kind of choices that we make in terms of how we present ourselves. I've always been fascinated by human behavior. And so I moved from simply studying things like the Myers Briggs Type Indicator and the Emotional Quotient Indicator into doing my master's degree in performance management and human resource development. And so because it's something that interests me and excites me, my focus now is really on helping people as a transformational coach and as a transition specialist, working with individuals and working with organizations. So that's a little bit about me. If you want to know more about me, as I said, you can find my profile on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, anything that you perhaps would want assistance on, if you want to hire a coach, of course, if you want to have any guidance or advice, you can always reach out to me as well. Message me on LinkedIn, or you can visit my website, btpcoaching.com, to get any additional information or clarification. So why does this matter, or why did I think this mattered? I have noticed, especially over the last year or so, particularly since the COVID situation has happened, that there are a lot of people who are walking around with that sense of worry, concern, not feeling like themselves, not feeling that they have what it takes in order to be successful. To be honest, I had noticed that it was happening a lot before that as well, but it seemed almost as though the COVID situation brought it to the fore even more. And so in my work, I have noticed that I meet people who feel like there is something wrong with them. They feel like they are stuck and they can't make decisions when they are faced with crisis situations. They feel like they're stuck in their lives and they don't know how they should proceed in their careers. They may want to get out of an organization, but they don't feel that they have the path to do that. They don't feel that they should even be considering that. And you then find that there are a lot of people who are tired and frustrated and overwhelmed. And so, as I work with people at various levels throughout the organization, even coaching them or just having them in training programs and having conversations with them, I noticed that a lot of that tiredness and that frustrations and overwhelm is coming from people not really thinking about who they are, what they want, and what it takes in order for them to really feel successful. And there are a lot of people who believe that what they consider is important, how they want to live their lives, is not something that they should pursue. And so I don't accept that. I believe that people have a right to define success the way that they want to. So if it is that you want to be rich and have a big house and that's how you define success, that's fine. If for you success means that you have a good family life, a good relationship with your spouse, that you're raising happy and successful children, then that is fine as well. But then once you've defined that, you want to be able to live in a way that is true to that, a way that is authentic, a way that brings you a level of happiness and satisfaction with who you are. And so during the course of 2020, because I realized that you were seeing more of it happening with people changing how they had to work, a lot of your connections and relationships that may have existed casually or formally or informally were being stretched or sometimes broken. And there were a lot more people out there now feeling even more overwhelmed and tired and frustrated and unsure of what to do. I started a group that really sits on LinkedIn that's called Surviving Transitions and Thriving. Now, it's still a small group, and that's okay. But one of the things that I want that group to be able to do is offer a space for people to talk about what they're going through. And so, why it matters to me and why I think it should matter to all of us about our personality and how it impacts our performance is because there is absolutely nothing wrong with any individual thinking about who they are, thinking about what they want, thinking about what works for them, and then deciding how they're going to use that information in order to perform at a high level. And the challenge that we have now is people aren't owning that, and people feel that there's something wrong with them for wanting what they want. And so I really want us to get to a point where we are discussing it, talking about it, and being honest about how we feel, and maybe supporting each other as we try to do things differently, and offering each other guidance on some of the things that we know work for us, and maybe some of the things that they can try for themselves. So that is why I decided then to have this type of session, to have a session where we bring together a random collection of individuals who are interested in understanding themselves and doing something with that information to thrive and to survive as they move forward. So, one of the things that I wanted to do as I get started with this, you're hearing me talking about personality. And so you may think to yourself, well, what really does that mean? What is a good definition that we all can work with when we're talking about personality? And we're talking about things like personality preferences or behavioral preferences. And so I went to the American Psychological Association's website to get a definition for personality. And so this is it. Personality refers to individual differences in characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So the fact is that you and I, as I'm sure you all know, the fact is that you and I, being faced with the same situation, the same stimulus, will have a different response to that. We will think differently about it, we may feel differently about it, and we will likely behave differently in the face of that stimuli. And so that is really what we are talking about when we're thinking about personality. We're talking about those characteristic patterns that we have. And so for each of us, we have this personality that has formed over the years that we've been alive. It, of course, has been influenced by everything that has happened to us up until this point. So it could be that we had good experiences as we were growing up. And so we've had a wonderful opportunity and ground for our personality to flourish. Or it could be that we had hindrances that happened in our life. We got a lot of negative feedback, and maybe it has influenced the behaviors that we are able or comfortable in displaying. And it may even have influenced how we think. It may even influence the feelings that we are willing to own up to having. And then a key part of understanding that even though you have this personality inside of you, in order for you to really focus on understanding it, you want to start thinking about those differences. You want to be honest with yourself about what those differences are. And that's where understanding what you need comes in. And then understanding how all those things work together in order to make you a happy and a whole person. Now, one thing that we know, because we understand that foundation of who we are influences therefore what we are able to do and how we respond to stimulus, we know that it also influences how we are able to be successful. It influences what we are willing to do, what we find easy to do, what we find more difficult, maybe even how much effort we are willing to put out in order to accomplish things. And for all of us, we know that there's some things in life that you love doing and you'll do it easily. And it may require a lot of effort, and you're still willing to put out the effort to do it because you just love it. It energizes you. It makes you feel wonderful when you do it. And then there are other things that you encounter in life, and it may not take a lot of effort, but you're not interested, you're not motivated, you hate it, you're demotivated, it sucks, you feel terrible when you have to do it. And so you don't put out the effort in order to do it at all. And so you're not successful at doing it. And where we see this happening a lot is when people are not able to honestly express or be honest with themselves about what they're feeling, then you sometimes see that they're then not successful in their chosen path, either in their careers or in their personal life. And it can be driven by the fact that you're not being true to who you are. So whether or not you're successful is going to be driven by who you are on the inside. And if you are a person who is motivated by accomplishment and you're motivated by challenges, but you've chosen to go down a path where you're not being challenged or you're not getting feedback that lets you know that you're growing, then you are likely to feel that you're in a situation that isn't feeding you. It's not supporting who you are. You are Success is defined differently for each person because you decide what matters to you. You decide you know what your values are. You decide what it is you want to spend your life on, because every time and every day that you're giving up your time, you're really spending your life, and you are the one who gets to decide how you spend your life. So you know that you can say that this is what success means to me. This is what I am willing to put my time, energy, and focus into. And for some people, if you don't make that a conscious decision, then you wind up feeling like you're spending your life, you're just wasting. You're wasting your time. You're engaging in efforts and energies that are not bringing you any sense of satisfaction or fulfillment. And that's where you don't feel successful. Success then is dependent on your ability to harness your strengths. So if you are in a position where you have taken the time to identify your strengths, you've taken the time to know what you're good at, what comes to you easily, what feels comfortable to you, and you are then able to put things in place that allow you to use those strengths, you are increasing your chances of being successful. If you, on the other side, have also identified those things that are weaknesses or areas for improvement, and you have taken the steps to manage around those weaknesses, because you're not always in a position to create improvement in those areas, but perhaps you've figured out what you can do in order to succeed in spite of them. If you were able to do that, then that also supports your ability to be successful. But the one thing that I would like to just say again and to emphasize is that success never happens just by chance. You often have to take deliberate steps in order to do it. And it is driven a lot by who you are on the inside. because you can have an individual who maybe is in a job that's high profile, you're getting a lot of money, there's a lot of exposure that's going on, and everybody's looking on and thinking you should be so happy and feel successful. And you could have that individual feeling like a failure. And of course, you can have the converse. You can have a person who has a job that maybe nobody admires, but the person who's doing it, they feel so successful. They feel like they're contributing so much to the world. They are achieving, they're accomplishing, they're doing so much that they're walking around floating on air because they are feeling that sense of success. So that's one thing that I would ask you to do is consider for you, what does success mean? And once you know that, then consider how is that being driven? Why is that how you define success? What are the values that you have that is supported by that? Because then that helps you to understand part of who you are. I'll ask you to take a minute and maybe just with a sheet of paper, just start identifying, noting down what are some of your strengths? What do you consider your strengths? What are those things that, this is how you define strengths. Strengths are those things that come to you easily. They are the things that maybe you've always done them. You don't take a lot of effort. It doesn't take a lot of energy. When you've completed them, you feel energized. You want to do more. You're excited. You feel so empowered. And people perhaps often say to you, you do that very well. And you don't think anything about it. You dismiss their feedback because it was so easy. Those things are often the things that are actually strengths for individuals. And your weaknesses are those things that really take a lot of energy. It takes a lot of effort in order for you to do it. So you will still do it because sometimes you're in a position you don't have a choice and you're forced to do it. But they are certain characteristics or certain activities that when you have to engage in them, at the end of it, you feel like you're drained, you want to go to sleep. It has taken everything out of you. You don't want to do it again. The next time somebody comes to you to ask you to do it, you groan inwardly, or if you're brave enough, you groan outwardly. And you know that that really feels like it's sucking the life out of you. And so those things are those that represent weaknesses for you. And it sometimes can take time for you to recognize which is which. Because I know a lot of people who are in situations where they don't have the opportunity to even use their strengths. And so they feel drained and they feel beaten up and they feel worn out and tired every day at the end of the day. And oftentimes it's because they don't even know what would energize them and what would make them feel stronger. So you want to start thinking about that for yourself. Now, I will say for me, I know that one of my weaknesses is having to do detailed work all day, every day. And I can still remember years ago having to do an assignment at work where I was asked to complete a form. I was applying on behalf of the organization, this would have been the business school, for a project. And I had to go online and I had to complete a form that required nothing else but detail and detail and detail. And it took me 4 days. And I remember later on sharing that with my CEO at the time. She said, "Did you complete it?" Because she had traveled. And when she came back, I said, "Yep, I did." It took me 4 days. And her shock that it could have taken me 4 days to complete a form. But it's because in order for me to do that form, I had to do a little bit and stop and go find something else that I could re-energize myself. And then I had to come back and do it because it still had to get done. And I had to stop and go find something else. And so that's what I mean when I say that you need to figure out how to manage around your weaknesses because they don't go away. Those things still exist and those things still are there and they still need to get done. And you are still approaching it with that feeling that it's not something you enjoy doing. So you have to figure out how are you going to cope in order to get it done. And later on tonight, we're going to talk about what it takes to energize and re-energize yourself and maybe have some routines that would help you to do that. But really, that is what I recommend for a lot of people when you are faced with that. So this exercise right here about self-disclosure is really an awareness building tool for you. It's up to you if you choose to share it with anybody else in your circle, but it's really for you to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then decide how you are going to harness and use those strengths more because it makes you feel more energized, and how you're going to manage around those weaknesses so that you can cope in spite of the fact that they may leave you feeling drained. One of the things, or another thing that I would want you to remember is this: that self awareness is really key to your success. Very often, I have found this as well from doing management training and leadership development. Very often, a lot of people make the assumption that when you say people do not see themselves clearly, that there are a lot of people out there who have these overinflated egos. I'll tell you, it has been my experience that often the opposite is true. You may have the individuals who have the overinflated egos, but we have a lot more people in business, in organizations, a lot more people in the world who simply do not see the potential that exists within themselves. There are numerous people who exist out there who underestimate what they're really capable of. And because they underestimate that potential, they carry around these self limiting mindsets. And so they are constantly thinking or questioning or pondering their ability to do or achieve something. And so what it means then is that they don't step up. If they have a new idea, they talk themselves out of it. If they come up with a potential solution that they think could save the organization money, they come up with an idea that they think could be beneficial for them. They have a great idea to start a new business. There's some new thing that they want to learn or offer or sell to the public. A lot of people out there in the world talk themselves out of that. You know, there's a quote from the motivational speaker Les Brown where he says, and he was quoting someone else, but he said that really the richest place in the world is the graveyard, because there are so many of us that have great ideas that we take to the grave with us. So a lot of people out there are underestimating what they're capable of. So what that means then is that you go out there and you mentally derail yourself. You see an opportunity, you think, well, maybe I could do that. And then you say, nah, there's no way. Nobody's going to want to hear me. You have an idea that you want to own up and you want to speak up, and you say, nah, nobody's going to want to hear that. But what I want you to start doing is really be aware if that is your truth. So if you recognize that you're coming up with ideas, you're coming up with suggestions, nobody, people perhaps are not responding the way that you want them to respond. And so you immediately assume that the idea has no value rather than assuming that your audience perhaps is just not open to the idea. And so what you do then, you devalue yourself, you devalue your contribution, you devalue your potential. I want you to be aware that that is what you were doing. Ask yourself, ponder and wonder, is there something that I can change within my mindset that is going to help me see myself differently? And so I specifically chose this image right here, the little graphic here, with the pawn that is seeing itself as a king. Because one of the things that you want to do as you go forward is look in the mirror and recognize that there is great potential within you that you are not seeing. Recognize that it is possible that there are people out there in the world who see more in you than you see in yourself. And so the next time that someone pays you a compliment, the next time that someone says you've done a good job, don't assume that that person is wrong. Say, okay, that's how they see me. I don't necessarily see that, but perhaps there's something there that I can reconsider. You want to own the fact that you may not be seeing yourself clearly and that there is more within you than you've given yourself credit for.